All right. Hello, hello. Hello, everybody. I hope everyone's having a great day. I am here again with our friend ZAYSAN. We had ZAYSAN on for a episode not too long ago. It's just been probably a couple of months or so. And he shared his incredible story about how he was has become close and friends with an ET race called the Pleagarians. And he actually began this relationship by rescuing an ET from a swamp in Florida, which was incredible. I mean, that story alone was unbelievable. But he went on from there to then also develop a relationship with this ET species, which he now calls his family, and he visits with them regularly. They visit with him regularly, and he's here today to talk with us a little bit more about an update of what's been happening with them, but also to answer anyone's questions. I know everyone always has questions about these experiences, and I do the best I can with asking the questions I'm curious about, but I know other people have their own questions to ask. So we have a live chat. So if anybody in the chat would like to ask questions, you're welcome to do that at any time. And ZAYSAN is kind enough to offer to give his side of the story, his answer to the questions, and maybe try to share with us what the Pleagarians believe or think about some of these topics that we're all very curious about. So anyway, just to get started, ZAYSAN, welcome. It's so good to see you again.
Yeah, so fun.
So first, I want to ask you what's been happening with you lately. I know that you had an event that you spoke at recently, and how did that go? I'd love to hear a little bit more about, how you're being received because I know you've been sharing your story quite a bit lately.
It was really fun. I kind of took them off guard when they asked me if, well, do I need a slideshow or anything like that? I says, no, all I need is a chair. And they didn't know what to do with that. And I said, they go, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'll talk about the quest a little bit, and then I'll talk about the Pleagarians, and then open it up to people. And it was kind of funny. What happened was it took off, and because when you know your subject, you don't need to prepare or nothing. And I like talking about the things I found out or learned, and the experiences that I've had with them. So I just went with it like that, and it was amazing. I mean, got standing ovation and all that good stuff, and I just thought that was remarkable myself. But everybody seemed to enjoy the story. So because it's my experience, sometimes I'll get questions about all this the evil stuff, and it just isn't in my realm. I mean, I have never experienced any of that. Only this love, and weird things have happened since then to me. But and my writing, my book, or the writing, if everybody's telling me that it's completely changed because I've never been a writer, but now I guess I'm an established writer because I've got 12 books, right, and 13 will be out soon too. So I don't know. It's just kind of funny to me, but yeah.
You're like an instant overnight sensation. You've become like a celebrity.
You mentioned at the beginning there about my connection with Sam Jess and how I met her, and I've learned recently that it's quite a bit different than what I thought it was. Uh, because for first off, we create, right, our own future, and uh, we don't. You realize that we're doing that, but we do that from the mind and not from the brain. And the mind isn't a physical part of us, but the brain is for survival. It's just no organ, and it makes things up when it doesn't have a reference for it and things. Well, anyways, I started to get curious, and I started to ask, and I said, so when I was there, was she true?
I think we have a little bit of technical difficulty. Stand by and we'll see if we can get Z back online here.
There we go.
There you are. I was like, if we just hold out just a minute, I'm sure we'll get back on track. So I'm glad that worked out.
Yeah. So,
Thanks everyone
anyways,
for being patient.
yeah. So I started asking her about that, and she says, yeah, but she wanted to see what would happen. And, and of course, it wasn't in agreement with the captain or anything, but she is powerful enough that where, he had to allow it to play out. Anyway, then I learned more about how we create our lives, right? How we create all the things that happen to us. The Dalai Lama once told me that, we always start at A and we end at B, but along the way we have what's free will, right? And we also have predestined meetings of people that cross our path throughout our lives. And depending upon how advanced we have become and they have become, will be the importance of that meeting. And but he didn't go into the depth of it, where like she was telling me that we always create in consciousness, in the stream of consciousness, we create everything that's going to happen to us throughout our lives. And so we actually, the Pleagarians and myself, created the event that was about to take place, which was me finding her in the, she was actually in trouble, but she could have been out of there. But she wanted to play it out and experience it. And so that's how that all started.
Wow. Okay. So, and I know I asked you this before, but you you were taking a walk in a swamp in Florida, just kind of minding your own business, checking things out, enjoying nature, and then that's when you saw Sam Jess over in the swamp, and she was hung up in a mangrove tree, I believe you said.
Yeah.
And they have kind of deep roots, and she was kind of a little bit caught up in the roots. And I remember I asked you, was she really stuck, or was she really just kind of playing along to get your attention and see what you would do? And you kind of said it was a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what's interesting about that, and I follow Bashar a lot. A lot of people know who he is. He's channeled by Daryl Anka, and one of the things he always says is that we do have a soul plan. And so we have certain themes that we have agreed prior to coming into this life that we would follow through on some of these themes that we've prior to now chosen. However, the way you move through the theme is not determined. So that's where your free will comes in. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as he always says, if your theme is to walk down a certain hallway, no matter what the topic of that might look like, whether it's divorce, whether it's, an abuse situation, or even something on the positive side of the scale, you can skip down that hallway, you can run down that hallway, you can crawl down that hallway. It doesn't matter how you get there, but you will go down that hallway. So that's how he always describes it, which I think is a great way. It's a good metaphor for us to think about how we are coming upon some of these experiences. So that's how I relate to what you just shared, is that
Mm-hmm.
this was something that was predetermined, that you would be encountering this species, that you would have this relationship, but the way it was approached and the way it was presented to you and how you reacted, those are your own choices to make in that matter. Is that a good way to think about that?
Pretty close. It's like a screenplay. In the stream of consciousness, we're fully aware, right? That's where we all live all the time. And in that, we create certain situations for us to take place in a designated time and place. And but the whole purpose behind that is to experience it. And I don't use the word soul. The soul is a container of our consciousness, which also never stop. It's always there, right? But I use spirit because we come here to experience, or we're projected here to have that experience. And so, yeah, we set it up, but like you said, we live it out, right? We actually do it. So, like if you plan on a trip to go to a amusement park or something, that's what we're doing in the stream of consciousness. And then we actually are at the amusement park. That's what we're living out, what we perceive as our life. Yeah, so we can have that experience, and then that leads to so many other things. It opens the door to so much of the stuff that a lot of people don't understand, and they make it so complicated, and you have to go through all these processes when you really don't. It's like when I teach people to do the sensing or help them, guide them into doing the sensing, the ball that goes through the body, and then seeing that love, creating the love, and then when that becomes real, the door opens or the veil comes away, right? And at that point, you have access to everything. and you'll see everything, right? But it's like a kid in a candy store, pick one, right? They go around and they get lost and they see a little bit of some of it, but they never get to see all of it. But there's always going to be a being there or an entity, and that's what you focus on. And you go to that being and give that being an absolute eternity to experience each other. And when you do that, you collect all those other things. Also, it's the thing that blocks a lot of people is like there's a story about the Indians. I always use this and over again because it makes so much sense. The Indians were looking out over the water and these ships were coming in, but they didn't see the ships because their brain had no reference to what a ship is. Until the people started to get it out, then they knew that there was people there, right? So they had no reference for it. There so much of what is there for us right now and all at all times are things that we don't even see because we don't have a reference for it. But the way to get that reference is to experience the being in front of you, right? When you go through that veil into the consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense?
It does. And one thing I wanted to ask you about that, because I know you talked about this during the interview as well, and you just said it now, give that being an eternity. So when you say that, what exactly do you mean? Because when I hear you say that, what that relates to me as is give the relationship the time it needs to develop. But I feel like there's a deeper meaning behind it that you're coming from.
Yeah, it's so simple. A lot of people don't understand it, but what it is that you give that being an eternity, meaning you're not going to decide when it starts and when it ends. You're just going to enter into that experience, and so whatever time it takes. In other words, you're not going to end it before it's over, because you'll know. It'll create that own avenue out at the end of it, but you got to trust it. And that's another issue that a lot of people have. I always tell them, when they start to experience something, believe it, number one, because it's actually happening, and then to then fully experience what is taking place and to be completely naked. In other words, you can't hide anything. You because that'll stop everything when you start to do that. Just like when you astral travel, right? With your first experience, the first moment that you fear, you bounce back in your body. It's not till that point where you allow yourself to continue to travel, that or let your projection travel is the best way to put it. That's when it's free, right? And that's when it can experience these things that we don't understand. And see, the brain has one level, and that's survival, and that keeps our body functioning and all this stuff, and then tries to make sense of certain things, which if it doesn't have a reference to those things, then it's going to make up whatever was in the core of it and try to expand it outward. So if it's a horrific experience, then it's going to make the entire memory a horrific experience, even if it was 2 seconds long. Where in the mind, you don't ask questions, you just accept whatever it is that you're witnessing and experiencing. And anything that you don't know, it's okay, because it's going to come to you later. And the funny thing about that is, like, say somebody's studying the pyramids in Egypt or something like that, and they find all these things they have questions about. Well, when they start studying it, the brain will take us into so many different directions. We may never find the true answer, or we may only find pieces of it. Where if we just let it go, the mind will bring it to us in a lot quicker than what it would take us to do it through the brain.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of good information there. And actually, before we go further, I just want to let anybody who's listening and watching know that you can put a question into the chat. If you have any questions for Z, he's happy to answer any questions. So feel free to drop those in the chat about his experience. If you watched the prior video, like I said earlier, he shared his experience with us about his relationship with an ET race called the Pleagarians, and it was fascinating. So I still have a lot of questions left over from watching that and listening to that. So anybody else, if you're welcome to put questions in, and Z can answer those for us. In the meantime, I did want to jump back, Z, to something that you just said when you were talking about the sensing. And you did tell us about that, and you shared there a minute ago that it's sort of, and correct me if I'm wrong, sort of a way of meditating where you bring this ball of energy kind of down through your system, through the top of your head, in through your whole body. And you're using a memory that you have of just pure love of a moment in time that you've had, or love that you share for another person or an animal. and you're taking that love in and you're letting it just kind of run through your whole system. Is that a good way to describe that?
Yeah, and what's cool is after I was taught this by the Pleagarians, um, I started. I don't know why it's the mind thing, right? Where you don't look for it, it comes. And I found out that in Vietnam during the war, that pilots would go out flying and on missions, and they would only be back for an hour or two before they had to go back out again. And in order to get that rest, what they implemented was the feeling the ball going through the skull and out the feet, because it takes you into that really deep level of rest. And then when you implement the memory of unconditional love that you have, no matter what it is, an animal or whatever, or a person, and you start playing that while you still have the ball going through your body again and again, that never stops. And then you replay this memory again and again and again until it actually becomes real, because it will, where you're actually there again. And that's when the door opens or the veil rises, that you can enter into the sensing space.
That makes sense because right now I'm actually going through the Gateway experience. Have you heard of
Mm.
this from the Monroe
Yeah.
Institute? So I have the CDs and I've been listening to them. And one of the techniques, the tools that they teach you is exactly what you just described, to bring the energy in through the top of the head. Actually, I'm sorry, let me repeat. It goes the opposite direction. And I don't know if that makes a difference, but they have it coming out of the top of your head and then going out around your body and down up through the soles of your feet and then back up. And so it's just a constant loop of energy that's surrounding you. Now, they don't include, at least not yet anyway, the love aspect of it. It's more just the energy of it and creating this vortex around the body. But it's interesting because that's exactly what you just described is one of the techniques that they share.
You ever hear of the Golf Breeze 6?
No.
A friend of mine, I was in business with him for a little while. Vance Davis was the original of the group of six that initiated the Gateway Project, and they all went AWOL because of the things that they saw. Once the
Mm.
veil had been removed, they started to experience all these things, angelic beings and others that would come to them. And so after work, that was they were at the type of security, and they were in Germany, and these beings were telling them that it all has to come from love, which is kind of interesting because, see, I experienced this years ago, and then here I am re-experiencing it with the Pleagarians in very similar senses, right? And that's where Monroe got all their information from, was that operation. And so, anyways, they were told to leave, and so they did, and they went to Gulf Breeze, Florida, and then that's where they got caught or captured. Well, they were top security clearance with NSA, and the penalty for that, I think, at the time was hanging, but either way, it was death because they were at the height of their security clearance, and they all were given honorable discharges.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow, that's really interesting. So obviously the love aspect is a really important piece to include
very.
in that process because I have another friend who he uses plant medicine and he has exited his body several times. So I was sharing with him that I was using the gateway process, and he said just be really careful with that because you're moving your energy into the astral, and there's so much that's going on there that you could encounter positive and negative type beings. And he was sharing with me that when he exited his body, that he could see the silver cord. He actually had access to be able to see it, and he could feel it sort of tugging on him. The way he kind of described it is that imagine if you're surfing in the ocean and you have that, cord that attaches to your around your ankle to the
Ethereal.
actual surfboard. It's like that, where it's like kind of tugs on you a little bit to kind of let you know it's still there and you're connected. But he was sharing to just be really careful with some of their techniques.
Yeah, and that's the reason they left, was they were being told to get out, because the way the gateway process works, it doesn't include the love, so it's not 100%. And when you do these things, they need to be 100%. The only way to get it to be 100% would be adding the love. But the
Yeah.
military didn't want that aspect in it because it would divert them from certain things, right? Or make them hold back on certain things. They made a movie that's not real accurate, but it's similar to it. It's Men Who Was it Men Who Talk to Goats?
Yeah, men who stare at goats, I think is
Yeah,
what it's called.
yeah, there it
Yeah,
is. Yeah, that came from or was a part of what they used to do. But
yeah.
yeah, that's why they left, and that's what he told me. It was how important it was because these angelic beings were was telling them they have to have the love involved within that because it's you're not necessarily creating it. I forget how you said it, but it's you're doing it in consciousness,
Hmm.
and that chord that's in the beginning. Once you move beyond that, where it becomes a natural part of your being about leaving the body, is you're not actually leaving the body because the body's not there. It's a projection, and there won't be a silver cord. There will be in the beginning, but that's for comfort, right? We all
Hmm.
need to go through steps in order to process certain things, but then we become light, which doesn't mean that we have this silhouette of light traveling through space, but what it is that we're the collections of the particles of light that's contained within space and here. You know, you just can't see it here because we have so many distractions. But I look at it as like snow, right?
Hmm.
We're a collection of flakes of snow that are traveling separately throughout the universe. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's just my experience.
What did the Pleagarians say about astral travel? Do they recommend it? Do they think it's not a good idea for us? I mean, is it natural for them, or do they don't even need to do that?
Well, they just kind of confirmed what I thought, and the remote viewing is not such a great deal. Not because it's very different than the like the Gateway Project, and it's different from what the original six were doing, because love has to be a part of that, because that's what makes it pure and makes it true. I think there's even things in the Bible that speak about this, but as far as like when I experience, I call it travel. Uh, me and Sam Jess are a quantum entanglement. In other words, we're the same person. We're just from two different planes of existence that merged, right? And anyways, we figured this out. So the energy that we use when we're together is amplified in a lot of ways, right? Plus, she's a very important person. And so, anyways, we'll have these spontaneous, in a sense. We kind of know it's coming, but we don't resist it. But we say, oh, crap, here it goes, and we'll be setting together or whatever it may be, and suddenly we'll start to feel this like pull. And this was really funny. At one time when I first started experiencing this, we just boom, we were gone, right? And we were having this experience. And I wrote about my book, and I wrote down the things that were happening. Basically, it was almost as though something took control of our body, right? We're facing each other, and our knees touch, and then it's like almost like somebody was gently pushing on us, where our foreheads come together, and then our nose touched, and then lips touch, and boom, we were gone, and we were traveling. We've had so many different experiences, in that I wrote them all about in my book. Well, most of them, but in that process, at one time, the family was looking for us, and they knew we had went into her room, and we weren't there. And just before we left, she had this little thing that you can spin, and it just sits there that hangs from like the ceiling. And she had touched that just before we did. And when they went in the room, we weren't there. And when we returned to our physical state or our projection, the thing was still spinning. So they just happened to walk in when we weren't there. So did we leave? I
Wow.
think of the old cartoon Speedy Gonzales. You know how where he gets his feet going, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, boom, he's gone, right? And I think it feels similar to that. So we don't know if we were there or just gone for a moment or not when we travel.
Right. Especially because time is not the same there as it is for us. So
Well, there's no
you
such thing as
probably
time.
felt like you were gone forever, and meanwhile, you may have only been gone for a few minutes.
A blink of an eye, because there's
Yeah.
no such thing as time.
Hmm.
It's just we're in a moment, and we live all of our lives what people perceive as our past lives or future lives. Those are all taking place at the simultaneously.
Right. That's one I still can't quite wrap my mind around. I mean, I know I've heard this a million times and I know it's true, but my little brain doesn't compute all that quite yet.
Well, that's funny because there was a what was it? trying to think where I was going with that. Oh, they started to explain to me, like, because in our travels, we were experiencing these different things like light body and ethereal and all these different types that we were a part of, right? And things that we saw, the different sacred geometry things that had meaning to them, and being the observer and the experiencer at the same time. And then outside of that also, right, we're watching the experiencer, watching the observer of us having, doing whatever it is that we were doing at the time. And uh, oh God, where was I going again? See, there's so much information. But
You should write a book.
yeah,
There's
I
a good
think I
idea.
did. Two of them at least, right?
Yeah, a few anyway.
but but when uh, where was that time? But oh yeah, so what they wanted to do is, I think it was Franz that set me down and wanted to explain more of in depth what was taking place, and then Sam Jess joined in, and Hans, and so I've got all these three eggheads just bombarding me with things so far beyond. They said, uh, each plane of existence has multiple dimensions. Dimension being an aspect of oneself, meaning one of our lives. So each of those dimensions is a projection of one of our lives taking place at that time, right? That's why they're all taking place simultaneously. But the thing is that on this plane, we have multiple planes of existence, and each one of those have multiple dimensions. And then this is when I start pulling their hair. They go, but that's not all. Like a car
But wait, there's
salesman.
more.
Yeah, yeah, that we're on multiple planes of different, like ethereal, light body, and so on and so forth. About as many as you can think of, fairy, whatever it may be. And I go, wait, time out. Homer needs to bring it back into this one, right? So I kind of stick to this one place that we are now, where we have multiple planes in multiple dimensions. So
Yeah, those are concepts that, again, I feel like I'm following with you to a certain degree, and then sometimes I deviate from following that trail because it starts to get a little complex. But um, and this always takes me back to like Dolores Cannon, right? Because she was one of the first pioneers who really talked about um, through her hypnosis and what she did with her clients is what the reality is of the universe and how it works. And one of the things that will always stick in my mind that she has said is that if you can conceive of something, no matter what it is, anything, if I think right now of a rhinoceros with four tusks and, that has like a unicorn, you know, horn on its head. I mean, if I can conceive it, it exists somewhere in the
mhm.
universe because there's no way that I could have come up with that concept if it wasn't already there. So that one blows me away. So that relates back to time because with time, that means if everything is in this present moment, then everything already exists. And that's another thing I have a hard time wrapping my mind around because if everything already exists, then that means everything has already been done. Every word has already been said, every action has already been taken. The question is, what path are you going to choose, right? That allows you to experience and have the experience of that choice of that path. So all the other choices are still available to you, but you basically condense reality down to that one path that you chose, which then allows you to have that experience. That's how I understand how Dolores Cannon shares the nature of reality. Bashar shares about this as well. And a lot of ET contactees come back with similar feedback. So it's interesting to think about that everything is here now already.
It's even deeper than that. And like I say, I make them homerize everything. So I don't know all of it, right? But I know enough where I'm happy with it. And it's like we're all, what we're on a spiral, right? And our lives that are projected are in different points of the spiral. Also, the thing that we perceive as time, this projection, we can go back and visit ourselves in an earlier time or a later time. And how we do that is you take and fold two spirals in on itself, like creating the center of double torus. And in that space, you can basically go back in time if there was such a thing as time, but it's all going on at the same time, right?
Mhm. Right.
Mind,
That's like
mind
a
me this
little
way.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
We have one of our channel favorites here, EP Pet. Good to see you, EP. And they're saying the energies have been varied from my perspective, communication glitches, peripheral movements, feeling stretched, energy attacks. So much progress happened and simultaneous BS in the media related. Absolutely. I would agree with that. And then you did have a question there as well. To nefarious forces, how do these frequencies on Earth affect our star families? Do they see this or feel it? So that one's for you, Z.
I'm not sure if I quite understand it. Nefarious forces being maybe negative,
So I think
but
this is
that's a
going back to
perception.
the prior comment where they had said, there's communication glitches, feeling stretched energy attacks. And then the follow up question to that would be how do those frequencies on Earth affect our star families? I mean, are they affected at all by some of these things, or is it more just
No,
us that are at the effect of it?
no, because it's a choice. And like we were talking earlier, we create this. So, what is bad and what is good, what is positive, what's negative. There are energies that are like that. Like Mount Shasta is a very negative place, but there's also a scientific explanation for that because of like you have both things going on at the same time. You have liquid metal running under your feet, right? And then you have the magnetic forces that are constantly being created and destroyed. And so when you're in that energy, you may not feel the same. And a lot of people want to think that that's because they're in a high spiritual energy field, but they're not. And some people, don't feel anything, which is pretty rare, but you should feel something because of everything that's going on below you. And what will happen is a good way of testing whether or not you're being affected by it is that if there's times that you have that you are not able to focus without thinking, that's a very good test because you're getting bombarded by all these different energies that are constantly changing, being created, being destroyed, and you're setting on that. And but it's different than Sedona. Like Sedona is like a garbage disposal, the way old Indian elder told me one time. He said at one time it was the place when people would go to from Shasta. They would go to Sedona and collect all that energy. But for many years now, people have went there and dumped all their spiritual crap into it, and no one ever cleans it up. It has to be cleaned on a regular basis, as much as they put into it. And I get that too. But I just step outside of Sedona and go to like Bradshaw Mountain or Bradshaw Ranch. Amazing. It's like Sedona was when I first visited it years and years ago.
Mm.
It was an amazing place, and I felt this energy, this cool energy, and it was just so fun. But just outside is like the old Sedona. Now it's got so many complications with people living there. They were never supposed to live there, and then
Mm.
all the different controversies and arguing and fighting, and you got to pay for everything. Spirituality should not have to be paid for.
Right, right. I agree with that. Okay, I have to ask more about Shasta because everyone knows Mount Shasta to be this spiritual place of a retreat, and and it's also considered to be like a vortex, one of the vortex locations on the planet. And people take, pilgrimages there. Obviously, we've had somebody on our channel who's shared their experience with being invited into the underground city of Lemuria that is supposedly underneath Mount Shasta. So, have the Pleagarians shared anything specific with you about Mount Shasta, what it means, what it's there for? Is there another civilization that lives there?
They kind of said basically the same thing that I just said, except for they don't want anything to do with that area because their frequencies are so changing there. It disturbs the brain or the mind or your body, and some people find, they feel, oh, that's my spirituality or that's my spirit being adjusted or that's somebody affecting me.
Hmm.
And the reality is that's a natural effect for there. So what is it else is there that you can collect or use from that field. Some people can, and some people are very good with that. But just do that one test. Where when you sit down and meditate, sometimes a lot of people will meditate, and if they're good at that, if they can sit there and keep their mind clear, uh, without thinking
Mhm.
of something or seeing something in there that pops up in their brain, um, then they're not being affected. So they have a strong ethereal, body at that moment, and so
Mhm.
that's fine if people can do that. And that's what the Indians would teach when one would go there. When somebody had set out on a journey or something, to test themselves at different times in order to make sure that their focus was correct, because anything else could be misleading. I don't know. I'll probably make a lot of enemies for that, but I mean, it's the truth. So that's all I can say.
Well, it's interesting because I have gotten a lot of mixed comments, we'll say, on the video I was referring to. I've had some people say that they don't feel like there's a positive energy at play with Mount Shasta. But then other people, like EP Pet here, just says, I was just in Mount Shasta, have been there before. I meditated there, had a beautiful experience with my family, but I did feel interesting, lingering energies after returning home that I needed to transmute. So it seems like a little bit of a mixed reaction to what's there.
You, you just validated what I just said.
Mhm. Yeah. So that's really interesting because you don't always hear people come out and say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, because you're not supposed to, right?
Right.
So you can
Very
benefit from that, knowing that energy. You can benefit from being, you know, in that space, right? When that different feelings occur. But if you don't know what's happening, where's the benefit, right?
mhm.
But if you do, that's why they would be sent there on pilgrimages, and then return with what they understood. But what they understood wasn't necessarily what they found on the mountain. It's on the journey there and the journey back, all that combined.
Mhm.
Moving through different frequencies, different energies. But yeah, you're standing on liquid metal. It's kind of like the sun.
Mm.
So you're going to have eruptions, and you're going to have all these other
Right.
things that take place there that you can't control.
Mhm.
I
Now
don't know.
is
That's just,
are the Pleagarians in touch with other species on this planet, other ET species? Are they aware of them or are they in touch with them?
yeah, it's pretty common.
Okay.
I mean, I've met many of them too.
On this planet. Interesting. And are they kind of filtered in among society, or do they kind of reside in a specific area? Like, are they drawn to certain areas on the planet?
Not necessarily. They like experience. Like there's these ones I call the Vulcans, right? I name all my people because there's no way I can identify them, right? But I do that because of the way their face is shaped, the small chin and things like that. They don't have the big pointed ears or nothing, but they just reminded me of that. So that's why I call them the Vulcans. And they have a planet. Well, their planet isn't, or their society isn't as old as the Pleagarians. And so, like in their history, like this couple that we met, their parents, talked about the old ancients and stuff like that in the history throughout, thousands of years. And, one of what brought it up was how the lady wanted to cook for us and the man wanted to prepare it and all this good stuff. And it was from the ancient recipes that had been passed down for years. And so they wanted to see what it was like prior to the advanced civilization that they live in now. And so they lived here for 6 years. And they had jobs and stuff like that. And it's a surprising, there are so many that live here. But it's not about contact. It's nothing that, is big. Consciousness will be when consciousness comes, right? That's what contact will be. The thing is that the things that I'm learning are the way contact will take place, because it's not necessarily physical. Most of it will be through consciousness, which is so much more. That reminds me too, one of the things, like when they were trying to explain some certain things to me, I asked him one time, well, Jesus said something similar, that, when he peeled all these people and he said, you, the people of this earth, can do all that I can do and more. And they really like that because it's absolutely true. And that's what I've found out since I've been with them, and the experiences that I'm going through, just like being able to recognize things that my brain has no reference for, but to be able to do it through the mind, and to realize that there's so much more around us, than what we think is there. I mean, so it makes sense. We are so much more. And when you go across through that veil, intention doesn't help, because intentions has been building all of your life, and that's what's pure. And if you set an intention prior to doing something like this, you're eliminating all that was from the past and recreating a new intention that's going to be very limited. So just trust yourself and believe in the experiences that you have. And then that takes you to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. Just like you were talking about the person who goes out of body and the cord following behind them, and they recognize what was taking place. It's the same thing. It's piece by piece by piece, right? Don't expect anything and appreciate everything, and just believe. And each time it'll get deeper and deeper and deeper. And suddenly it becomes a natural thing for you. I don't
Yeah.
know. Again, that's
Yeah.
just me.
So for anybody who might want to have, let's say, their own personal experience, right? They want to have the same experience that you've had, or even just to be able to see something in the sky. It doesn't benefit them to continue to ask for an experience, is what I hear you saying. They've already
No.
put the intention out there, so now they have to trust and believe that the experience will take place in the right timing.
Just like this is kind of funny too. Everybody, when they're thinking, they're using the brain, right? And they think they want to have this experience, this physical experience, or they want to have this, or they want to have that, right? But when the veil is, like the Buddhists call it nirvana, right, where everything is, right? Everything, you don't need to know anything. You know every language. You know everything there is to know, right? When you enter into that space, what you truly want may be something different than what you think you want, and that's what you'll receive, and the reward will be so much more. I use it like when people pray, right? They pray for something specifically. Well, the true way to pray is with the fewest words possible, and not other than you just however people want to pray. Thank you, I love you, amen basically is the best prayer, because every time you start to say and stuff, you expect to see something. Every prayer is answered. That's what a lot of people don't understand, and they don't see it because they're getting what they need, not necessarily what they think they want. And
Mm.
so it's the same when that veil comes down and you enter into that space of pure unconditional love, because love is the energy. That's what you need in order to get wherever it is that you want to go and see, right? Love. You have to have that love, because it changes everything. That's the magic. What we call magic, people walking through walls, people doing all these things that are unbelievable. That's what we call magic, but that's what our reality is. We're all capable of that, but we just need love.
Hmm. Yeah, and I know from what I understand, prayer is actually being in a state of appreciation and gratitude. That is prayer. It's not, oh, please, may I have, this car, or please, may I have whatever it is you're asking for. It's being grateful for what you already have and
Yeah.
appreciating that.
Yeah.
So that's the energy of prayer, which is what
Yeah.
opens you up to receiving more.
Yeah. Also, a car is not love.
True. But people pray for it.
Yeah, and it's also, what do you call it, an attachment, right?
Yes.
Like I had this 4-wheel drive Toyota 1986, and I just loved that thing. It was raised. I mean, everything about this vehicle I just absolutely loved. And then when I was in California, I knew I had to leave, right? And I just had to sell it. And so I found I was very satisfied with myself because I was able to sell it
Mm.
easily, because I knew that's what I needed. I needed to leave.
Mhm.
And so that was one of the things I needed to part with. But a lot of people will find attachment in inanimate
Mhm.
objects. There's no love there, and no love
Right.
is coming back to you. So it's one sided.
Right. Right. And I always look at it from the perspective of I'm giving something to someone else who needs it. Because I've moved enough times in my life that I've had to sell things that, furniture that doesn't fit in the new place. And, there might be a chair that I've had for years and I absolutely love it, but I can't imagine letting it go. But the truth is, when I start looking at it from the perspective of where it's going, and that the person who is getting it is going to also need it and they're going to love it and it will provide a resource for them, then I feel better about giving it up. So it's just a matter of like switching up that perspective on it.
Yeah.
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 I want to talk about what we talked about when we first connected earlier before we got online. You were sharing with me that Sam Jess, I don't want to steal your thunder, but I'll let you share the story. I asked you what's been going on lately with them, and you told me, you started telling me a little bit about Sam Jess and what's been going on with her. I would love if you could share with us so people can hear an update from the Pleagarians and what's happening in their world.
Remind me which one, which part of it was that?
So you had mentioned that there's an island
Hmm.
that she visited, I believe. I don't want to take
Yeah.
any more away from you, so I'll let you
Yeah.
share
On the
more about
Pleagarian planet, the Pleagarian planet is very similar to ours, but it would be like an entire planet of the Philippines because they're all broken up in there's no big continents. They're all multiple islands everywhere, and so there's ocean there and all that. And every Pleagarian gets their own place, their own property, and she had this perfect plot, right, because of her lineage, and um, and she wasn't really interested. The most Plagarians or most aliens that we see, they don't they don't stay. They're not homebound. You know, they don't have property, so to speak, and they don't live on their home planet because there's so many other things, the colonies and other planets and so on and so forth. And so, um, anyways, it was just out of the blue. She let that piece of property go and traded it for island, an entire island, but nobody wanted the island. And so it's like, why are you getting rid of this perfect piece of property with mountains and stuff on for an island? And she recreated the entire island and rebuilt it in a sense, so it's a paradise. And one of the things that I suggested to her to have on there as a place of ceremony, because ceremony is very important to most of the alien races that I've met. And it's interesting because it's kind of like here, right? The caveman kind of did the same as the Native Americans did, the Mongolians, the Siberians, the Iranians, and so on and so forth, right up to today, right? It's all similar based on the same things, about the planet you're on and so on and so forth, the birds and skies, so on. And anyway, so I suggested to build a kiva where we could do ceremony, a large kiva. And so she did. She actually did without telling us. And she built a bunch of other things that are there that's just incredible. But anyway, the kiva was particular because, it's American Indian, Pueblo were the ones who did that. And this grandfather that we know that her mother had a relationship with in the sense of contact throughout the years, right? And then when she passed, Sam just took her place in a sense to continue that tradition of being with these native people in order to do ceremony and share different things. And so this lady named Mother, who's like the Dalai Lama, right, of space, and she's really closely connected with Sam Jess. He suggested, well, why don't you bring grandfather and grandmother and their daughter up here, or granddaughter, to come and do a blessing. And so we did that, and it was absolutely amazing. It was incredible, and it was
wow.
very traditional. And I put in my notes so that it'll be in the book the words that he used and spoke and what they mean. And then Sam Jess was opposite him and did the same thing from a Pleagarian point of view, which was absolutely beautiful. So it was an incredible event. But yeah,
And for anyone listening, can you explain what a kiva is?
it's like a big hole in the ground, right? And you got a fire pit in there and stuff, and so you go down into it, and then it's usually circular, and it's usually stone, right, that they build it around. And there's different ones, right, for different types of tribes and things like that. But essentially, that's a place where you go to do ceremony, where you have a center, somebody in the center, and then you'd have the people around it, and they create a blessing walking in and walking out, and the positioning of where the entry is, and so on and so forth, and how the fire's lit. So a lot of tradition in a kiva, but basically it's about ceremony, bringing
Mm.
people together.
Do we
It's
have any place on this planet? Do we have anywhere on this planet that is like that?
oh, many, yeah. Yeah, just certain people know about them, but
Mm.
but you can find them. Any of the Indian ruins that you'll find with the Pueblo, they'll have normally have I'm not American Indian, so I don't know the lore, how far it goes back, but I'm aware that you go to different sites where the pueblos were, and they will have a kiva where they did ceremony.
Mm.
Just like the Mongolians they had their thing, and all of them. But I think all traditional people used to have places that they designated for ceremony, like sweat lodge and things like that.
Right.
So, but
Right.
here's something interesting too. Is like
Mhm.
when I was in California, I got to meet a lot of people that were very superficial in the sense of spirituality. I can talk from authority. I say because I went through the Shaolin training. I went through the gauntlet, where you have to risk your life. I became priest, and now I'm abbot, right? Considered a walking abbot. I've also had many times with the Dalai Lama and other leaders in spiritual organizations. So when I say that superficial, it's people that do all the talking but don't do the actual work, and are completely different when they leave the space. So there's not a lot of those people, but you get what I'm saying. Well, they always
Mhm.
talked about the stick. The only person that could talk out of respect would have the person with the talking stick. Well, what the true story behind that is the talking stick was for meetings of tribes that would come together that had differences. And in order to get their point across, they respected the one who held the stick. But when people got along, there was no such thing as a talking stick.
That is so funny. On a quick side note, can't believe I'll share this, but so I write. I'm a writer as well, and I write stories and plays, and I'm writing a book as well. So one of the stories I've written, just like some of them are comedic in nature, and I've written a short story about a talking stick, which is funny that you brought it up, but it's in the context of people in an office setting, like a corporate office setting, and they're in cubicles, and they're all infighting amongst each other. One person plays their music too loud, and the other person, is on the phone and talks too loudly or what have you. And so there's an HR meeting, and the way the HR person handles it is she brings in a talking stick, and they can only speak when they're holding their talking stick. So it just popped into my head when you were sharing about that.
Yeah, that would work, right?
Right?
That's
I know. You're
that's
not
the
allowed to speak
tradition.
unless you have a talking stick.
Yeah. Uh,
It came from somewhere. It must work.
yes.
But I do find it interesting that these ancient Indian cultures, the indigenous Indian cultures, that they had such a strong connection with their ET brethren, right? Like that they have, and they still do to this day. Back in ancient times, they called them the Star People, but they're still so connected, much more so than any other culture it seems on the planet. They still have that very strong bond, and they still have, I'm assuming, uh, historical texts that talk about the times from their ancestry where they had this connection, but it's still so rooted in their culture. Whereas I think a lot of other, you know indigenous backgrounds don't have quite as much of a connection, let's say, with the Star People or their Star family. So is that something that the Pleagarians have shared anything with you about?
Well, we had a prior ceremony with grandfather in another place where there were 10 chiefs there from different tribes that all gathered. And they told many, many stories, about their connections to the Star People. And what was really cool is the one I liked the best was how they would build ladders to place the stars in the sky. And there's so many of those stories. It was just like I was in heaven listening to all these old people talking about, yeah, old people talking about, stories from the starseed people.
Mm.
But yeah, and they there's the tradition, but a lot of people don't understand that what we call Native Americans were not the first peoples that was here. There was many other types of people, the Mongolians and Siberians, Russians coming across the Bering Strait. Texas was one of the most populated places, and there was many black people that were in that population. And so that just shows you how far people had come to be a part of this. And then what another thing I'll make people angry with is like how the tribes, there was no one nation of Indians. There was just so many, and they all consisted of about like 20 or 30 people. And so there was no one unit. It was just people, right, that was living here. And they just would with the Mongolians, they kill them all that they could, but they would at times they would take slaves from them, and then you'll see a lot of the traditions that, and we can prove this with the mouth and everything else, the skeletons that they found and all, but a lot of the traditions blended together, which made it even more beautiful. But none of them could get along, and so they would just we call it, they're very savage people. A
Mhm.
lot of them, not all of them, some of them, and then the colonists come over and they repeat the same process to the Indians. So who's next, right? I mean, it's just like we just keep doing the same mistakes over and over again, no matter who's here.
Right, right. Well, hopefully we're learning. Hopefully we've learned our lesson by now. Um, I did want to ask, and before we get there, I want to mention to anyone listening that, Z's here today and he is generously sharing his time with us. If you have any questions for him, you're welcome to put those in the chat. If you watched our previous video with him, he shared about his experience with the Pleagarians, which is an ET race that he met and developed a relationship with, and now he visits with regularly. And on that note, I did want to ask you, Z, when was the last contact that you had with your family, and were they here visiting you? Were you there visiting them? What did that look like for you?
It was a day ago. Um, the way it usually works is I'll feel a little bit static. I've gotten used to it now, but that's when I know they either want me to come up or they're coming. And I'll walk into the hallway, like you take one step, and then the next step you're on the ship. And it's because of the way that that you move, right? You're not beamed up, you're not beamed down. They don't have engines to take them across the universe. That what they do is I think we talked about it before, but essentially they want to go to a certain place, could be hundreds of light years away, and they're able to calculate every frequency that's living in that space at that moment, wherever it is that they want to go, their target. And they can also see it to about 3 seconds ahead of time. There's other things I can go into, but just let's keep it simple. They become that frequency. That's how they get from one place to another. It's not wormholes or anything like that, but it's instantaneous. So, in the same way, I go to the ship or they come here.
That's very much in alignment with what Bashar shares as well about how his people, the Ssani, travel, is that they don't move from location A to location B. Their ship embodies the frequency of that location. And so they basically just disappear in one location and reappear in another. And that's
Yep.
how travel takes place for them. So that totally makes sense that they would use the same type of technique, I guess, to
Mhm.
be able to do that. Now, I know you also shared earlier that you had a situation with Hans and you taught him something recently. So I would love to hear that story.
Well, Hans is, they're all taller than me except for Sam Jess. I mean, they're like close to 7 feet or just a little shy of that. And the reason I call him Hans, I named him and his friend because they look like Hans and Franz from the old Saturday Night Live thing. And he looks like a complete surfer dude, and he's real strong, and they're all perfect bodies, right? But and he wears his hair a little longer, so I always since I met him, I wanted to take him surfing, and because he's kind of adventurous, we kind of get in trouble a lot together. What we do, and anyway, so we're on the planet, and I had been talking to him about surfing and how amazing it is. And there just happened to be a small beach on one side of the island that we were on. And so, I said, dude, we could go surfing if we had boards. And so one of the things that Sam just put on that island was basically like a lab where all of them could actually live there and do their work. They wouldn't have to be on the ship. They could do it all from there. But, like I say, they're not, people don't, aliens don't really get, they don't have a home like we do. They create home wherever they go. Anyway, so we start going through the woods, the forest area there, and he's picking out the wood, because I had explained to him what it needs, and stuff like that. So we grab this wood and he take it down to his lab and he starts to create the boards. And then he starts to want to add all this little special stuff that where it would take over in case, when you're surfing, and it would create more of whatever it needed. And I just tell him, no, that's not, you're ruining it. You're losing the whole focus of this, right? And so anyways, I got him on board and we took it down, and he made his boards were amazing. I mean, they looked like the old style ones, but they were light, and they didn't need the sex wax or anything to put on it to make it glide. It had this permanent coating that he created on it and all. And so, anyways, we get down to the beach and he's ready to go, and I says, "No, you have to wait for a second. I have to explain to you about." So I gave him the spiritual side of surfing and what it was all about. And when you talk to these people, they understand you, right? What you're trying to tell them, and then they try to mimic that if that's part of what the experience is to be. And so we go out on the board and everything, and the boards, and he fails and fails and fails to be able to stand up on it, which is humorous to me because I mean the very first time I got on a board I could ride it. I mean it's not that difficult. It's not you don't have to do a lot of training. It's just real
I
simple.
even
And
got up on the first time I tried surfing.
yeah. And he kept failing. And finally, he got a ride for a few seconds. And he was so happy and he was like screaming and everything. And then he finally got a couple real rides and everything. And then afterward, we go back to the beach and he was so excited. He was talking and talking and talking. And I says, wait a minute, now I have to teach you things. I have to teach you the lingo, like gnarly and things like that,
Hang 10.
cowabunga. And it was so funny. It was like that movie E.T. where, he would start screaming all of a
Yeah.
sudden, they go all excited. Yeah, so we're walking back and he starts, cowabunga, and all this good stuff. It was very humorous, but I always add those things into my books. I don't put everything in there, but I put the things that seem to make sense that people would want to know about, like dark matter and things like that, rogue planets and frequencies and all this stuff that they've taught me, and how they collect energy and that sort of thing, and how they grow their plants. And,
Yeah. So real quick for the surfing episode, do they have tides on their planet for their oceans? So do their
on their planet and so, like the Vulcan planet, they have tides. Theirs is mostly almost all water planet.
So I'm surprised they wouldn't have discovered surfing before now on their own planet.
It may have been a part of their culture way back there, but they're like 2,500 years ahead of us. So you kind of put that in perspective and how they live their lives. There's no monetary system, no nothing like that. But there are people who there may be some people that know about surfing, but him in particular and anybody in the ship, none of them had any clue of that. Basically, they were lab rats before when I first met them. That's what I call them, lab rats, because they had studies and they really didn't know each other very well, but they would come to go to different places. One of the places was Earth to study like the movement of animals or insects and what people were creating and things like that, but not necessarily embedding themselves in it. And they saw people, humans, as monsters, violent, So I wasn't necessarily so welcomed if it wasn't for Zam Jess on the ship when I first got to go on the ship.
Yeah. Well, hopefully their opinion has changed now after meeting you and having more experience. Are they coming to visit here regularly now? I mean, I know you said that they come see you, but do they come on a regular basis and kind of get into the culture and see how things are being done down here?
Not really in that way. I've brought the family down for fireworks, and I've taken Sam Jess like to the mall, those sort of things. She's experienced Christmas. Like this 4th of July, we were on a large boat. A guy invited onto this like yacht and was able to drive up and down the Caloosahatchee River and out into the ocean, watching all the fireworks that were going off. Things like that. There's a process because their eyes are so big. They've created these, I call them like gargoyle sunglasses in a sense, but they'll change tint and they also make the eyes look smaller. So as long as they got those on, nobody really pays much attention other than they're all absolutely beautiful people. And I've taken several of them to the Indians, the grandfather, his granddaughter has a ranch and with horses and stuff. So I've taken some of the family out there where they got to meet like the horses and that sort of experiences.
It's funny that you mentioned about 4th of July because I literally had the thought during the 4th of July that supposedly we've got so many ships up in the sky overlooking our planet right now, just kind of waiting to see what's going to happen next and, they're very curious about how we're progressing. So I was thinking from their perspective, like they must be like, what in the world is going on down there with all of these like fireworks going off on this one day at this one time, and only in North America, right? Like for the most part, I mean, that's the reason why we're celebrating is for our independence. So it's not happening all over the whole world. It's just in one slice of the world. So, I mean, was that confusing for them? Or I'm sure you explained the history of 4th of July and what it really means, but
there, there's so many different races that study us and stuff, but and follow the progression. It's almost like a tourist spot for a lot of aliens. But as far as like contact work goes, there's very little of that. Um, but because it's about more about consciousness, and I mean, it's kind of complicated because there's so many different levels of contact, and primarily they focus on children because before they could have a real physical contact with us, our consciousness needs to change drastically. They, anything that they would be intervene with could change the entire planet and our where we're going, and so we're kind of hands off in almost every aspect of contact, but it's those who reach a certain consciousness. Now, I've met people who were basically contactees through the Pleagarians, and their first batch was really horrible. I mean, they were kind of like UFO conference addicted people, sort of thing. That what I'm talking about.
mm-hmm.
And then they changed their methods after they had met me in some ways, and they introduced me to them, and they were far younger, and they were incredible people. And but they focus on very little children. Like there was a video, on YouTube. I don't know if it's still there. A little girl, Chinese girl, she's walking down this aisle with all these dead flowers that are coming to life as she passes by them. And what basically the things that they teach these little kids, because they're not all corrupted and programmed in the head rat, is that they can use all these things that they learn, but they cannot teach them to us. They have to keep them to themselves and basically be, what people want to emulate. And so, in other words, if they see it, the 100th monkey sort of thing, in order to get our consciousness to a point where we could receive people from others' places.
Well, I want to know that technique to bring flowers to life. I think that would be beneficial for the rest of us to know how to do these things.
It's part of sensing, because and sensing and the love, because the love is so important. We use all of our brain, right? But there's all this space, almost unlimited space, to put in memories. And when we plug those memories in, what it does, like we have two hemispheres, right? We've created that in through the program, right? Logic and emotion. And women tend to lean towards the emotion, men towards the logic, yet neither one of them are as good as both of them together. And so what they do is they blend the mind, right? That's one of the processes that they helped me with, was basically to blend the hemispheres together. So I think both logically and emotionally at the same time. And so consciousness, that's where consciousness begins, is because that you start to see things that aren't there in a sense. In other words, you feel sense, because all communication comes from emotion and feeling. It doesn't necessarily come from anything that you hear. Now, when they speak audibly, they'll make tones, right, which is like a universal language. I asked them one time, how is it that these different aliens I meet all can speak English, right? And it's because that every language has, even animals, have certain tones and rhythms to them, and so they're very easy to mimic. And see, we got two cats that we brought on the board that one of the aliens just absolutely loves, and it's like, now I know why they can do things I can't do. Because I guess Laura's talking to them, It's like, no, man.
A direct line of communication.
Yeah.
It was it Kitty was one, right? And what's the
Luna's the
other?
new one.
Luna, that's it.
Yeah,
I'm assuming they're still enjoying their time on the ship.
absolutely. They touch the walls and little butterflies will come out, not real ones, but they'll play, right? So they can create their own play environment. It's amazing. And then Laura's built all these things in her room. It looks more of a cat house than it does a space lab technician's place, But
I know we dubbed her last time as the crazy space cat lady. I don't know if
Yeah.
she wanted to have that title or not, but
I
we're
equate her to,
sending her that title in love.
yeah, I use Mary Ann from the Gilligan's Island because she's always taking care of everybody, you
Yeah.
know. So,
Oh,
but
that's nice.
they're just all so nice, and they all have a unique personality. And for the longest time, it was very hard for me to tell the difference between Earth people and them, other than they were really smart. But and at times I thought I was just a pet, right, sort of thing. But now I'm starting to understand because they told me from the very beginning that we are all equal, all of us, because we just have different skills, for
Hmm.
whatever environment that we live in, and theirs
Hmm.
is massive. So
Yeah. And I do want to ask you a question, but before we go there, I just want to remind everybody that Z can answer questions. If you have a specific question that you'd like to put into the chat, feel free to go ahead and do that. Steve says, thank you for your service. So that's very nice. Thank you, Steve. We appreciate that. Yes, your endingchildsexslavery.org is the name of Z's organization. We actually did a separate interview to talk specifically about that topic, and that is currently being edited. We are hoping to get that up in the next week or so, and that will actually be out on Rumble. So, in case anyone wants to watch that, because YouTube sometimes doesn't allow the algorithm to for us to talk about that topic, but I'll send out a lot of notices about that so you can follow there. But I did want to ask you, so, and we talked a little bit about this, but not too much, is that what is their relationship like with other species in the cosmos? And the reason I'm asking this is because I have another guest that I'm getting ready to do an interview with, and they specifically have a relationship with the reptilian race, which I know is very controversial. A lot of people think all reptilians are bad. I personally don't believe that. I feel that there's, everything out in the universe is reflected based on what we have here on our planet. We have good and bad people here, so there's good and bad people out there. And that goes for every race across the board. So I'm curious, what is their experience with other ET races? Do they have ones that they're closer with? Are there some that they don't get along with, or they stay away from on purpose, in particular the reptilian races? And by the way, I know that that's kind of a generalization. There's actually a lot of different species under that umbrella of what we call reptilian. There's it's all under the what they call the draconian empire, and there's alpha dracos, and there's a plethora of other different types of ET reptilian races. But what is their experience, and what do they share with you, if anything, about other ET races that they encounter?
well, I've met many different types of races and such, but um, this is my experience, right? It's not to be compared with anybody else's and thing. As far as reptilian goes, I've never really seen an alien that resembled a reptilian, what I would perceive as reptilian. Um, I've seen many types of beings, but generally, like in the realm, that's like the major thing where there are millions of species, and like Jess is the queen, basically, for lack of better words, and the they taught me about natural law, and natural law is like the key to everything in the universe, and it's like kind of what you. Yeah, I tried to look up the definition in a dictionary, and it doesn't apply. Natural law is basically the path of least resistance, the one that benefits rather than it has any negative effects, and so everything is run throughout the universe in natural law. And the thing is that there's what I call bug people, which may be what some people call the reptilians and things like that. And like I told you the last time I had this experience with one of them. They're, to me, they're more like insects, these bug type people, the ones that don't look like us or even close to us, and they think differently. They think more of a hive mind. And for instance, like if there's a planet where they need to harvest minerals or whatever, natural law only allows them to take what would never affect the planet. And so they'll take everything that they can take without affecting the planet, but it's usually more than what they need. And so they will trade, or not trade, but they'll give to the human type people whatever they don't need. So that's always has use. So it's never ending, right? And all of value. And the same with what the humanoid type people do. But as far as they don't connect much because it's very difficult to communicate with them, and them for us, because we don't think, we don't have the emotion the same, and all these different things. And so but they work together, in a sense, throughout the universe with natural law. Um, there is some races that I found very difficult to communicate with, and there was a particular alien race. I call her Navi. She looked a lot like the Avatar type people, except for the skin tones and stuff. But they can change that too. But anyways, their race is more of a communicator. And one time when we had this large gathering, this like 2,000-mile spaceship in space across in diameter. And I got, each of them had their own space where you could visit and learn about their race. And so I went to see her, and communication was the thing. So she had this thing where the ancient people, the one that they're tall, but they look kind of like grays, but they're more of a greenish color, and they they have emotion, and they can speak, but it's very, very difficult to understand. And like humor, they have humor, but it's really hard to find, and it's like exhausting for me, was when I first met them, to have a communication with them. But they're the ancient ones. I think I forget the names that people told me they probably are, but anyway, they've been here for many, many millions of years. And so, anyways, and she had this machine or contraption where I could choose a person, which I chose a Palladian because they're the most like us, in order to have a communication with one of these ancient ones. And so on the other end was what would appear like a hologram of one of these people. You couldn't tell that it wasn't really there, right? And so, anyways, there was like a pre-programmed dialogue that we would have, and in that process, I was able to learn so much about being able to communicate with them and getting the signals or the signs of what they were truly meaning. But so there are those, but there's others that can't speak, but they're very joyful, and they have this energy and emotion about them. And then that's when I learned about, like it's, well, I think they call it the cynetics or whatever, where you have the metal board, it vibrates, and when you auto into it, it makes a certain symbol,
Mhm.
which is kind of funny because I've been in certain temples, and I asked the master there, "Oh, what's that symbol mean?" Because I've seen it when I created one of them, and he would try to explain to me, which wasn't even close, right? And so a lot of these old time masters and stuff don't even know what a lot of the symbolism is that they use in their different things. Anyway, so that, like you see signatures on side of several different species ships, where they'll have like a language in a sense, but it's all the same. It's the universal language that all talk to each other. But now I've even learned deeper that you don't need any of that. It's what you express emotionally and how you feel. And the way that, see, this is how they teach me things, because I'm just a stupid human. Like we like to play jokes on each other. And I was seeing that they were almost like they were reading my mind or something a lot of times. But I caught it, and it was like every time you say something to them, there's this moment, just this quick moment. If you're not paying attention, you won't even see it, where you can see emotion come from them. So they're receiving the emotion, and then when they express themselves, they're expressing the feeling. And so what I would do is mislead them in a sense. You can't lie, you can't deceive, and all these things. But when it comes to humor, there's little loopholes that you have. And so I would come off with something that came from love and get them distracted so I could pull a prank on them. But anyway, so I know that that's the way that works.
That's so interesting. They always say that sound and vibration and frequency is kind of the universal language that I think most species communicate through, and that's how, as Bashar says, they use telepathy to communicate. Not necessarily telepathy, but telepathy, which is what we use where we're involving emotion in the communication, which is kind of similar to what you're sharing.
Yeah, that's another thing that always confused me too, is that when people talk about they speak through the mind, and I've never really experienced that, but like you're just saying there that yeah, I do have experienced this where they can, it's a sensing sort of thing, right? That they can tell what's happening from it. That's pure. And see, that's another reason that it's so difficult with us, like we are in our conscious state, in order to communicate with us. And that's what the reason, once we reach a certain level of consciousness, we'll be able to do that. And then that opens up the doors to actual contact.
Hmm. Yeah, and I am curious. I wanted to ask you this before, is that we have been told that we have evolved from the hominid species that was the original being that was on this planet, and that the Anunnaki, specifically Enki and Enlil, had come here and basically tinkered with our DNA, which is ultimately how we have evolved into what we currently are as Homo erectus or Homo sapien. And so, if considering that story that we've been given, how is it that we are similar in nature then to the Pleagarians? Because if we evolved from a hominid species, what was their evolution, or did they have a specific species that they came from, and what do they know about our species and how we evolved to where we are? Have they shared anything with you about that?
Yeah, a lot. But none of that resonated with me when I'd hear these different, there's so many of these stories, right? But what did resonate when they, I call it homerization. When they speak to me, I ask them to make it, to a homerization. In other words, dumb it down. And basically, they describe to me how, and it explains like how the pyramids were built in that place, Pupu or whatever, and Lake Titicaca area,
Mhm.
the pieces that fit together. They said that life is a tree, right? And yeah, the tree has many leaves on it. And throughout time, the leaf would drop down and hit the ground, and that was a species. And it would take off running, and it would exist for a period of time before it died out. It became extinct again. So, more leaves would fall and take off. And so, at times, there were multiple species that lived on the earth, and it's primarily dependent upon, as far as planet to planet, species to species, is the more similar your planet is to one of theirs, the more similar the people are that are able to survive. Just like at one point, when our species was here, or is here when it began, there was another species here, the elongated heads, and they've showed me the 4 different type of elongated head species on the different planet, or different with continents, and that some could fly and some didn't, right, with wings and such, and how they coexisted with our humans when they were learning to pour the blocks for the pyramids and create the glass forms that they poured their concrete into. It was one of these beings, the elongated head, that was teaching human, because we were at very low level at that period of time when it was being created, because that was tens of thousands of years ago when the pyramids were built. Same as with the building with the Lego block type things that were like magnetic. And they explained to me how when they poured those, where they got the magnetic or magnetite and stuff that allows them to have that magnetic energy. They weren't charged or anything. It was just natural pieces that they found. So if we make it, we'll be fine. But if not, another species will take our place.
Well, that's a very comforting thought. Speaking of which, have they shared with you what the potential looks like for contact? I know you mentioned it a little bit ago, but Bashar does say the year of 2027, that is the year everything will change. That is what he is specifically going on record and saying. And his claim is that there will be some type of event. It may not be on a huge mass scale across the entire world, but there will be an event that takes place that opens the eyes for everyone to see that this is truly a legitimate thing, that extraterrestrials do exist and that we do have them here on our planet. We do have relationships with them. And so that's something that he has prophesized. Is there anything that the Pleagarians have shared with you that we can look forward to in terms of a contact event or disclosure?
first you got to define contact. Um, what we perceive is so limited. And it's funny too. I had a TV show years ago that I was one of the producers on, and the stories back then with Bob Dean and all these famous people are still the same today. They have not evolved. It's as though they have not grown and understood anything more. It's all still projection, and what they're projecting, and which is interesting to me. But um, consciousness is what's going to be necessary, and we're hundreds or if not thousands of years from the ability to have the consciousness to be fully part of something like that. And the thing that most people need to understand is, let's say that uh, ETs come here and they give us this thing that will make water for everybody, right? And that everybody will always have water. And then they revisit us in 2 years and we've destroyed the entire planet because we're not conscious enough to understand how that is to be, used. Um, so contact may have a much different life. But also, I was told that April and 26th that there will be a spike in our consciousness, which I don't really know what that means, and I don't usually ask because then it would be a brain thing, and the brain thing is fallible and impure. So
Mhm.
the mind would be pure. So I'm waiting for a clarification,
So
but we may not see that. But
April
we
of
may not see that.
2026. Okay, so that's only like 8 months away. So
But we
that
may not
tells
see that.
right.
Yeah.
Well, it may be something energetically, right, that we can
Yeah.
feel, but we may not have the visual effect of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I mean, that could really be a lot of things. That could be something that's entering from our solar system, from the solar system into the planet's orbit, right? Like it could be a large object that comes into our orbit, or it could be technological in nature. I mean, there's a lot of things, or it could be emissions from the sun. I know we've been having lots of big solar flares coming out in the last couple of years, and then there's the talk of the solar flash, the grand solar flash. Is that something they've given you any intel about?
No, because it could be something that we're aware of as it happens, and it could be something that years later we'll discover
Right.
that there was this shift in consciousness, because
Right.
consciousness is absolutely everything. And it's like nature challenges each time someone advances, or
Mhm.
evolves. And so, yeah, it sounds like a cop out, right? Yeah, oh, it's going to be an energy shift and stuff. But I the way I feel right now is I don't expect to notice something, but I'll know that something had activated. But it's just a matter of paying attention. But the one thing, the way I see what I feel is it may be that pathway that we start to understand what consciousness means and how that communication can help us evolve into a different type of people.
Right, right. I know scientists are constantly doing, different testing and different have different hypotheses, and they're doing all sorts of different types of things to try to determine what is consciousness, where is it in the body, how does it affect us. And I think we're not quite close to getting those answers yet, but hopefully we're advancing closer to that each day. So maybe the Pleagarians will step in and give us a little hand at that at some point, because I'm sure we could use it. But this was great, Z. Thank you so much for talking with us again. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you wanted to share about, or any messages that the Pleagarian team has for us?
Just love and
Just
believe.
trust and believe. So when you see those ships in the sky, or if you have an experience, believe that and know that that's true for you.
Yeah, if you see a ship, it may not be occupied. The majority of them aren't occupied. They're more like probes or observers, but the ones that are, they will have a living consciousness to them. So, you know, be respectful, and just, it's like my very first time when Sam Jess set me down. She said, do the sensing, do the sensing. So I'm doing the sensing. And then I said, like, I see these movements, right? And I say hello, and I hear back to right, crystal clear. I don't know if you've had this experience before, but a lot of people have, where it's almost like somebody's standing right next to you and they talk into your ear. And I heard, hello. And I was so excited that I actually had that happen. It was like, did you hear that? She goes, yeah, yeah. I got all excited and lost the whole train, you know. But yeah, believe, right, and trust within yourself, and understand that God, these people are here. They're with us. You may be walk passing them down the street. You know, it's like in the Bible that says, you know, don't pass that one along the street. You never know who an angel is, you know, and that sort of thing. It's the same thing to me.
Yeah, all of a sudden, a lot of these passages that are in the Bible are starting to make sense in a different way. I'm looking at it through a different lens. And I'm like, oh, okay, I think that's what that means. You know, it's not as mysterious now that you incorporate the cosmos into what the potential meaning is behind some of what's written. So well,
Yeah.
thank you so, so much. This was so much fun. And thank you, everyone in the chat, for watching. We appreciate it. And just before we go, can you please share with everybody where they can buy your books? Because you definitely want to go out and check out Z's books. He's got a number of books. How many are you up to now? Think you were up to
Uh,
like 12 at one point.
yeah. 12 is in process right now, just the
Okay.
finishing touches, and then 13 will come out right after that.
Lucky number
Yeah,
13.
yeah. I think I started this in 22, and I've got 12 books or something like that. I
Unbelievable.
don't understand it either, but there's so much information, and I want to share it with people. And
Mm-hmm.
again, you got to remember, this is my experience. I don't
Right.
compare it to anybody. I don't argue with anybody else's thing. You know, it's just
Of course. Of
you
course.
take
And
it
there's a
for what
lot
you
of
want.
great information in these books. So I know because I've been reading them. So, and what's the best place somebody can go to buy your book?
Amazon. They're all on
Okay,
Amazon.
perfect. I'm going to put that link in the description of the video. If anybody's interested, I would definitely recommend checking those out. And keep an eye out as well for the next interview that's being edited right now. Z and I did a conversation about his other organization, and you'll definitely want to watch that. It will probably be on Rumble, but we'll put out some more information about that as well. So
Cool.
thank you again, Z. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your energy and for sharing this information and for all the work that you're doing with the children. We really, really
Thank you.
appreciate it. So thank you. All right. Bye, guys. Bye, everyone. Have a lovely evening. Take care.